that today's presentation is eligible for continuing education credit through Earmark. So I'll go over how to get your CE credit at the end of the presentation today. Let's go ahead and dive in. My name is Taylor Gorel, and I am a Senior Registration Specialist and Team Lead. I work with nonprofits nationwide to keep them compliant with state charitable solicitation registration and reporting requirements. And I have worked for many years in the nonprofit sector. Labyrinth and Harbor Compliance support nonprofits by providing comprehensive compliance solutions, including nationwide charitable registration and reporting. On your screen, you'll see a few of the many wonderful nonprofit organizations that we have helped keep compliant. Let's begin by looking at the topics we will cover in today's webinar. Today, we'll discuss the following: state charitable registration requirements, online fundraising activities and how they trigger registration requirements, why fundraising compliance should be a priority, what it takes to register to fundraise and how much it costs, and how to manage state fundraising registrations and simplify the process. The presentation will be about 40 to 45 minutes, followed by a 5 to 10 minute question and answer period. Let's start by reviewing a few terms to ensure that we are using shared language. At its simplest, compliance means respect and adherence to rules. Charitable registration compliance is respect for and adherence to the laws and regulations governing charitable solicitation registration. What is charitable solicitation? Charitable solicitation is fundraising, asking for funds for a charitable purpose. While the IRS is the regulator of nonprofit status, the states are the regulators of fundraising. 40 states and the District of Columbia have charitable registration requirements. Each state has its own unique regulations for fundraising activities. These states require charities to register with them before they begin soliciting within their borders. Why? To protect the generous public and legitimate charitable organizations and the reputation and special status of the nonprofit sector. Charitable registration and reporting regulations were written with these goals in mind. They are focused on regulating the solicitation of donations, not the receipt. I'm going to repeat that because it's very important. It is the act of soliciting donations, not the receipt of donations itself, that triggers the need to register. We'll discuss the difference in just a moment. This map shows the states that require charitable registration. It's a great resource, and you may want to bookmark it to use as a reference. The web address is labyrinthinc.com/state-map. The 41 states shaded in dark blue and orange require charities to register to solicit. The difference is that the states in dark blue require charities to register to solicit, and the states disclosure statements. I'm going to go ahead and launch a quick poll here regarding charity registration. Interested to know how many states your organization is currently registered to solicit in. I'll leave this open for a couple minutes. Okay, so it looks like we have a pretty close to an even split between organizations not being registered and being registered in about 1 to 5 states. I'll go ahead and end the poll here and share the results. You all can see. Yeah, it's pretty close. Most people registered in a handful of states. All right. So we'll discuss charitable disclosure statements a little bit later in the presentation. But first, I want to dive into charitable registration. Many nonprofits wonder whether charitable registration and reporting requirements apply to their organization, and if so, in what states. Chances are a charity that fundraises must register and report in at least a few states. Why? Because as we just learned, the registration requirements are based on the act of soliciting, regardless of whether or not donations are received in response. Let's discuss regulated solicitation in detail. As we learned earlier, solicitation is simply fundraising, the act of asking for donations, and it can take many forms. The most common traditional solicitation methods are mailing letters, placing phone calls to prospective donors, and holding fundraising events. Some other solicitation methods regulated by states include applying for grants, collecting membership dues, and collecting donations through a charity's website. Today, most organizations have pivoted from in-person events and solicitation methods to virtual and hybrid events. While this allows for greater reach and continued operations, nonprofits should be aware that these activities may trigger additional fundraising registration obligations. Additional methods of solicitation, such as using fundraising counsel or professional fundraisers and partnering in cause marketing campaigns, also known as commercial co-ventures or CCVs, also trigger fundraising registration and reporting requirements in many states. For-profit entities and professionals that assist charities with fundraising often need to register with the states and follow up with reports as well. Many charities solicit using several of these fundraising methods, any one of which may trigger state registration requirements. And many organizations solicit in more than just one state using any combination of methods. To know where your nonprofit is required to register, you must closely examine your organization's solicitation activities in each of the 41 states with requirements. If you're soliciting in any of these states, you may be required to register in one or more states. Now let's talk about another type of fundraising regulated by states that often requires charitable registration obligations. We are frequently asked about compliance for online fundraising. Now, most charities fundraise online. Many charities accept donations on their website using a Donate Now button. Also, nonprofits commonly make solicitations by email, often asking for donations in their email newsletters. Social media is another common form of online solicitation. So are text to donate and text to give. These solicitation methods allow charities to broaden their circle of supporters and solicit residents of every state at the click of a button. This nationwide access to supporters raises questions about how nonprofits who fundraise online must comply with state charitable registration requirements. 8 states have laws governing online fundraising. Most of the remaining regulating states' fundraising laws were written before the advent of the internet. As more nonprofits began to fundraise online, there was an increased need for clarity and consistency from state agencies. So in 2001, to make things more straightforward, the National Association of State Charity Officials, or NASCO, met in Charleston, South Carolina to develop guidelines for when an organization would need to register. The resulting guidelines are known as the Charleston Principles. The Charleston Principles suggest that if a charity has a donate button on its website, It should be required to register in a given state if it sends targeted emails to residents of that state or receives ongoing, repeated, or substantial donations from that state. Unfortunately, the Charleston Principles do not define ongoing, repeated, and substantial donations. The Charleston Principles were also not codified into law in all states. So, while they provide a framework for online fundraising compliance, they do not determine where nonprofits must register. Fundraising online is generally considered soliciting nationwide because Donate Now sections on charity websites, emails to newsletter subscribers, and online asks are all solicitations that can potentially reach prospective donors in every state. When nonprofits receive out-of-state donations from online solicitations and follow up with those out-of-state donors to ask for additional donations, whether by letter, email, phone, or any other method, the nonprofits are furthering their charitable solicitation activities in the state where the donors are located. Many organizations ask us how to handle unsolicited donations and whether receipt of an unsolicited donation triggers registration requirements. While it is possible for a nonprofit to receive an unsolicited gift and never follow up with the donor, the situation is quite unlikely. After all, development staff and volunteers are explicitly charged with engaging with donors and turning them into recurring supporters. Additionally, the state of California requires nonprofits to register within 30 days of receipt of funds, unsolicited or not. Now, there are two practical approaches charities can use to be compliant when they fundraise online. The most comprehensive way for a nonprofit to become compliant is to register or pursue an exemption in all 41 states. For many organizations, charitable registration in all 41 states is the best option because it allows them to fundraise nationwide by any method, including online, while minimizing the various penalties, fines, and losses associated with not being properly registered to fundraise. These organizations invest in fundraising compliance as capacity building. Understandably, though, not all organizations have the ability to obtain charitable registration in all states. Budgetary constraints are a common challenge, particularly for new and very small nonprofits. For these organizations, a second approach might be better. The nonprofit registers in those states where required by its regular activities and is then careful not to undergo solicitation activities in other states that may trigger charitable registration requirements. These organizations should consider placing specific language in their website and on solicitation materials that excludes certain states from those where they can accept donations. Ultimately, organizations must weigh the cost of registering in a state with the opportunity cost of not accepting donations there. We encourage nonprofits to register where they should and not risk trying to evade state charity authorities. Given what you now know about fundraising registration requirements and when they apply, let's take a look at how to determine where your nonprofit may need to register. First, you should determine which states your nonprofit solicits and compare the list against the 41 states regulating fundraising. Your nonprofit will generally need to register or file an exemption from registration in these states. Please keep in mind that state requirements and your specific fundraising activities will change over time. So make sure to repeat this step annually or semi-annually before commencing a capital campaign, major event, or another major fundraising initiative. Now let's discuss exemptions. Typically, state fundraising registration exemptions are based on the type of nonprofit, its solicitation methods, and its revenue. Rules vary from state to state regarding which nonprofits, if any, are exempt from registration. The most common exemption is for small nonprofits with little total annual revenue, under $10,000 or $15,000. The number varies by state. Other common exemptions are for specific types of schools, certain hospitals and healthcare institutions, and houses of worship. Not every state offers each of these exemptions. Organizations should carefully check each state's laws where they are fundraising to see if they may be entitled to apply for an exemption. It is essential to understand that most exemptions must be applied for and sometimes renewed. Additionally, should your organization change its mission, programs, structure, revenue, or original criteria for tax exemption, it may quickly need to register in states where it was previously exempt. Becoming compliant in every regulating state requires thorough research of the specific registration and exemption requirements in each state where your nonprofit solicits. A great first step towards compliance is to educate your leadership about state charitable registration requirements and the various fundraising activities that trigger these requirements. Okay, I'm going to launch one more quick poll here about managing registrations to see who in your organization currently manages your charity solicitation licenses if you have them. I'll leave this open for about a minute. Okay, so it looks like most people have an in-house employee that manages their registrations. And coming in second, a third party that manages your registrations. All right, I'll go ahead and end the poll and share the results so you can see. All right. All right, let's talk a little bit about why compliance should be a priority for your nonprofit. So likely your organization will need to register in at least a few states and will potentially need to register in all 41, which is a significant undertaking. While charitable registration requirements have existed for many years, states are becoming stricter with enforcing charitable solicitation regulations. Why? States have done this to protect donors in their state and the reputation of legitimate charities and the nonprofit sector as a whole. Your organization can avoid the risks of noncompliance by taking steps now to become appropriately registered to fundraise in all states requiring registration, even if your nonprofit has been out of compliance in a state for some time. This proactive approach generally avoids penalties, investigations, or further scrutiny from authorities. Here is a quote by the former Pennsylvania director of the Bureau of Charitable Organizations during a speech to a group of nonprofits. If you were coming in voluntarily, even if you had been violating the law for 10 or 15 years, you always got a pass. The bottom line is you want to try to register voluntarily. End quote. States want to encourage legitimate nonprofits to register to fundraise as required and maintain their fundraising compliance. States do not wish to chastise charities for trying to do the right thing, even if they are a bit late in doing so. In our experience, states are more likely to resolve a missed registration through informal resolutions or settlements than through fines, penalties, or litigation. Charities, of course, must be compliant in every state they fundraise. Organizations that raise funds in every state must generally register in all 41 states with requirements. That may represent a substantial investment of time and effort, but the upside is tremendous. It is a license to fundraise without borders or inhibition. Charitable solicitation requirements are law. Your nonprofit should treat fundraising registration requirements like federal Form 990 filing requirements and your financial review or audit requirements. Registering for charitable solicitation and renewing those registrations should be included on your nonprofit's list of annual priorities, and registration costs should be budgeted line items. Online state databases of charities reflect fundraising registration statuses, which are accessible to donors, grant makers, sponsors, and other corporate partners at any time. And donors aren't the only ones checking this information. 92% of regulators indicated that they too conduct internet research on nonprofits regularly. For these reasons, your nonprofit will want to ensure it's registered to fundraise where required. It may also result in revenue increases. No responsible donor wants to give to an organization that doesn't follow the law. Studies show that charities that register and promote their registration status to prospective supporters get a better rate of return on their fundraising requests. That's because supporters gain reassurance from the fact that the organization they're giving to is compliant. Maintaining legal compliance is not only the law, it is a best practice for nonprofits and is a significant area of the Nonprofit Standards for Excellence Code of Ethics and Accountability. Fundraising and licensing compliance are essential to running a lawful and responsible organization and protecting the nonprofit sector's reputation and special status. The first step towards achieving compliance is sharing what you've learned today with your executive leadership and board of directors. Your organization's leadership wants to protect your nonprofit's reputation and future success. We often find that many board members are not fully aware of state fundraising registration requirements, the risks of noncompliance with these requirements, or the benefits of investing in compliance. Now that you understand these details, take the initiative to start the conversation within your organization. Encourage everyone within your organization to educate themselves on the topic and advocate for your organization's prioritization of compliance. Now let's discuss what it takes to register to fundraise and what it costs to register. The specifics in each state are very different, of course, but on the whole, you can think of getting registered in 4 phases: research, apply, monitor, and renew. Let's discuss research. It's essential to research your nonprofit's current state fundraising registration status before filing anything. You need to determine whether your organization is not registered with the state, is in compliance, or is in bad standing due to a past registration that was not appropriately maintained. To register, your organization will need to complete an application, pay a state fee, usually based on annually reported revenue from Form 990, and submit supplemental documents, typically your most recent Form 990, your financial statements or audit, your formation documents, and your IRS nonprofit determination letter. Some states have corporate registration prerequisites that must be completed before you can register to fundraise. For example, in several states, your organization may have to foreign qualify with the Secretary of State as an out-of-state nonprofit corporation. In a number of states, you may also need to appoint a registered agent. The registered agent must be located within the jurisdiction and is responsible for receiving service of process and other legal documents on behalf of the organization. Understanding and completing these prerequisites before submitting your registration will help you to avoid rejected applications. Once you've researched each state's requirements, it's time to apply. In each state where your organization seeks to register, you must accurately complete an individual application and compile copies of that state's required documents. Registration applications will be required to be filed through an online portal portal, in paper, or by email, depending on each state's requirements. While there is an element of convenience to reporting online, it can dramatically increase the time you must spend learning to navigate multiple state websites and enter data into them. Some of you may have heard of the Unified Registration Statement, or the URS. This document was created to streamline the application process in all states. Unfortunately, though, not all states accept the Unified Registration Statement, and many states require additional supplements to the statement. The URS itself is longer and more complex than state forms, and in our experience, state examiners generally prefer their state forms and might often take longer to approve the URS. Once your state registration applications are submitted, you must monitor your registration status and confirm your application approval. Some states take just a couple of weeks to process registration applications. Others take months. During that time, your organization will monitor the receipt and processing of your state registration applications. Unfortunately, it is not uncommon for registration applications to be rejected by states, requiring their resubmission. When you resubmit applications for correction, you'll need to remain in correspondence until official approval of the resubmitted application is issued. The time from registration application submission to approval may be between a single day and 6 months. Processing times vary from state to state, but through efficient management of the process and the detailed submission of correct and complete applications, your organization can minimize those processing times. Most nonprofits find the fundraising registration process to be complex and time-consuming. For those of you who haven't yet gone through the process, you should expect to have monthly, even weekly tasks applying and monitoring registrations. Now for the question you're all probably asking, what does it cost to register? As you might suspect, this answer depends on the organization, the annual revenue, and the number of states your organization is registering in. But I can answer this for you today in more general terms. A rough estimate of the range of total annual state fees for registration in all 41 states is between $1,500 to $9,500 for most nonprofits. Now, that's not a per state cost, it's a total of all annual state fees. The total annual state fees to register nationwide for nonprofits with less than $100,000 in gross revenue will fall on the lower end of that range. Nonprofits with more than $10 million in gross revenue per year will pay total state registration fees at the higher end of the range. The remaining nonprofits will fall somewhere in the middle. The charitable registration process does not end with registration approval. States require registrations to be renewed. Most states have annual renewal periods for fundraising registration, although 2 states, DC and Georgia, renew biennially or every other year. Tracking all of your organization's registration renewal dates and ensuring the renewals are filed on time is critical. Most state deadlines are based either on the organization's original registration date or the end of its tax year. Completing your organization's Form 990 and financial statements, which usually must be independently reviewed or audited, depending on the state and the organization's revenue, on time is essential to renewing your state charitable registrations on time. This is important if your organization does not currently get an audit completed each year. Organizations should work with their tax preparers and auditors each year to determine what type of financial statements they need and by what date to remain in good standing. While some states permit extensions of time to file registration renewals, others do not, and late fees can add up. There are also other potential consequences, including damage to reputation or denial of the right to solicit. Like with initial registration, it's critical to adopt a proactive, strategic approach to ensure that your state renewals are submitted on time. Now let's briefly discuss an additional state fundraising requirement: charitable disclosures. 25 states require nonprofits to include specific language on solicitation materials and donor correspondence. These disclosures are different from those required by the IRS. Organizations will find that they will need to comply with state and federal requirements. State-mandated disclosure statements inform donors where to find more information on a charity's leadership, finances, and activities. State disclosure statements are generally required to be included in all solicitations and donor correspondence to residents of that state, and typically include appeal letters, email asks, website donation pages, pledge reminders, and donor receipt letters. State disclosure statement requirements frequently change, and your organization must stay current on each state's current requirements and revise your solicitations and donor correspondence to comply. Although this may be burdensome, regulators often review a nonprofit's website when reviewing their charitable solicitation registrations and renewals. Studies have shown that donors respond more favorably to nonprofit solicitations with disclosure statements. Disclosure statements demonstrate an organization's legitimacy, transparency, and adherence to good governance practices. So make sure to include disclosures because they are required by law and because they boost trust and giving. We've now come to our final webinar topic: how you can manage and simplify the fundraising, registration, and renewal process. Just as with initial registrations, renewals require the preparation of state applications, determination of the appropriate fees, and compiling all required supporting documents. These documents often include a copy of the organization's Form 990 and financial statements, which may need to be reviewed or audited depending on your organization's size and the state in which you're registering. The most significant difference between initial and renewal fundraising registration filings is that renewal filings have a set renewal deadline for all nonprofits. Tracking each state's deadline is crucial to avoid late fees and penalties. Organizations need an accurate record-keeping and reminder system to track each state's license numbers, fees, and renewal due dates. Many of our clients come to us using some combination of an Excel spreadsheet and a calendar. These systems fail most frequently because they require manual attention, leading to human error and unintentional omissions each time a state's requirements change. Organizations must monitor state law and administrative procedures for relevant changes regularly. At any time, reporting requirements, mandated disclosure language, registrations, renewal due dates, and costs may change. With changes in leadership at state registration offices, registration forms, portals, and even acceptable versions of signatures are also prone to change. We've discussed the complexities of managing state charitable registration and registration renewals. We've discussed the importance of state charitable registration and why your organization should prioritize fundraising compliance. Every organization's path to compliance is going to be different. Those of you who need to register in multiple states may be concerned by the complexity of the registration and renewal process and the initial and ongoing drain on staff time. We offer a solution. I'd like to take just a few minutes to provide a brief overview of Labyrinth Inc.'s managed compliance services. We take care of all state prerequisites and fully manage each step of the process, from research to application preparation to the compilation of all documents. We cut checks for state fees, send out registration and renewal packages, perform the necessary follow-up with the states, and monitor the approval of each and every application. We take care of any needed extensions and renewals for you as well. We make it as simple as we can for you to get and stay compliant. Our approach to state charitable registration compliance is to provide full service management at a flat rate per state. We bill for services on an annual basis and don't use any hourly billing. If you're interested in learning more, you can schedule a time to speak with us without obligation and get a plan outlining your organization's path to compliance. As a complement to our managed compliance services, we offer software to track state-by-state compliance details for you. The software is for tracking purposes only and does not automate the preparation of the applications. Our software updates the current status of registrations, state fees, and renewal dates, which assists you in planning and budgeting. The software offers multiple users and varying permission levels, so your leadership, board members, accountants, attorneys, and other consultants can all have visibility. Our new disclosure tool makes it easy to maintain charitable disclosures. The tool provides accurate disclosure statements for your website and printed solicitations. It dynamically updates in real time as there are changes to requirements or registration data. It also creates alerts for any issues with registrations that impact the disclosures. We offer referral and affiliate partnership opportunities. For the accountants and attorneys who are with us today, our nationwide registered agent network allows us to help you wherever your clients are located and enables you to manage both your for-profit and nonprofit clients. We offer industry and occupational licensing across all sectors, including the nonprofit sector. We also routinely partner with firms and organizations to create co-branded educational content that benefits your clients and the industry. You can view our curated collection of educational resources on both the labyrinthinc.com resource page and the Harbor Compliance Information Center. Please contact us for more information on our partnership program. And if you have any additional questions about your organization's compliance need, please feel free to give us a call to schedule a pathway conversation. As I mentioned at the start of the presentation, today's session is eligible for continuing education credit through Earmark. You can use the QR code on your screen now to download the Earmark app, and after the session concludes, we'll email out a 5-question quiz. Once you complete the quiz, you'll receive your CPE certificate. Okay, now it's time for some questions and answers. I'm going to begin by answering some frequently asked questions that are likely to apply to many of you. The first question is, in addition to a state's charitable registration requirements, must organizations also have to complete corporate registration as an out-of-state organization before fundraising? And the answer to that is yes. Corporate registration, also known as foreign qualification, and charitable registration are two different state requirements. Charitable registrations allow a charity to solicit contributions legally in a state, while corporate filings, such as those that are completed with the Secretary of State's office to obtain foreign qualification, instead are required for a nonprofit to do business in the state. So if you're looking to hire employees in a state other than your state of incorporation, buy or lease property or offices in another state, or offer services or sell products in a state, you're definitely going to want to look into that foreign corporate authority first. The next question is, have any nonprofits been prosecuted for non-registration of solicitation? Yes, so generally, charity regulators will first send out an unregistered nonprofit who is soliciting in their state a cease and desist letter or some sort of communication requesting that they stop fundraising and get registered as soon as possible. Charities that persist in soliciting without registering have been fined, prosecuted, and I have even seen charities have their right to solicit revoked altogether in a particular state. Next question is there a reprieve for ignorance of state charitable compliance regulations? No, unfortunately not. But states generally do not impose fines and penalties on nonprofits that are coming forward proactively, and let the state know that they want to get caught up on their registration or that they're pursuing registration. Next question is, if we only fundraise online and through social media, do we need to be registered in every state? Now, as I covered earlier, generally organizations who fundraise online and through social media must register or seek exemption in each state that regulates fundraising. So you're definitely going to want to do your research, take a look at the different state requirements to determine if your organization needs to be registered in a particular state if you will be engaging in fundraising online. The next question is, do we offer help with starting up a 501c3? And the answer is yes, we do offer nonprofit formation services. Please contact us to learn more. Next question is, does requesting paid corporate sponsorships or partnerships count as solicitation? Does applying for and receiving funds from philanthropic foundations count as solicitation? The answer to that is yes. Requesting corporate partnerships and applying for funds from philanthropic foundations are both solicitation of funds for a charitable purpose and are considered regulated solicitation requiring state charitable registration. A note there is that grants from state and federal governments are excluded from this. The next question is, do nonprofits hosting virtual or hybrid fundraising events need charitable registration in all regulating states? The answer to that is that, yes, solicitation at events, whether in person, virtual, or hybrid, are still solicitations, and the fundraising nonprofit hosting the event is still subject to the same state rules that govern charitable solicitation. So you'll definitely want to do your research in a state if you're holding an event there to find out if you're properly registered to fundraise. Next question is, what are the compliance obligations for foreign nonprofits? So foreign nonprofits can only fundraise in a state through a US nonprofit that is registered to solicit donations in that state. So typically, a foreign nonprofit will first form a US-based Friends of nonprofit. So that Friends of nonprofit organization will get incorporated. They'll obtain their IRS determination letter, tax exempt determination letter, and then the Friends of nonprofit can go ahead and register to solicit in all the states where the organization wants to seek donations. And then one more final question here. Can a US nonprofit legally fundraise in foreign countries? So the answer to that is yes, but just like in the US, most other countries also require nonprofits to register to fundraise. So you're definitely going to want to do your research about those regulations and requirements overseas before you begin any solicitation abroad. So if I didn't get to answer your questions, please feel free to reach out and schedule a pathway call if you have particular questions about your organization's compliance. But thank you all for joining me today. I hope I helped you understand your organization's state charity registration obligations. Please feel free to contact us again if you need help managing your nonprofit's fundraising requirements. Hope everyone has a great day, and this concludes the webinar for today. Thank you.